This is Ron Brown. I'm beginning a series of videos on fractals and VPA, and I'm using two software programs. I'm using Thinkorswim, and I'm using HGS Investor software. As you can see, the screen layout that I have up is dominated by information from HGSI software. The three white charts are HGSI and the warehouse, which also contains the filter, and what we call the combo ranking is HGSI Investor, and this chart down here in the corner is Thinkorswim. Now, the reason I have to use two software programs is that I use one for screening, HGSI, and for the longer term charts, and then for the intraday chart, I use Thinkorswim. I also trade through Thinkorswim, so it's always open and running, and the data, the intraday data that is in HGSI, is driven by Thinkorswim. Now, I'm going to talk about fractals now. Many of you may not know what a fractal is, but fractal is essentially probably the easiest way to describe it is that all charts and many things in nature are built upon the smallest component, and then as the components build, this is transferred to a chart, in this instance in a larger time frame. So what I'm using here is I'm using a stock called ENPH, which has been a great stock throughout the year. In fact, it was a decent stock last year, and then it started going much higher, and I want to show you how these fractals work now. You can look up here at the daily chart, and you can see that this stock has begun to roll over. But if we look at the other charts to the left, you can see that while this stock ENPH was running up, it was a very tight pattern on the weekly chart, and the same thing happened with the monthly chart. As I go down here to the bottom, and I'm going to make this full screen, this is a 78-minute chart. Why a 78-minute chart? Because a 78-minute chart is the individual trading day, about 6.5 hours, and each one of these bars or candles represents 78 minutes, and this is where changes begin in the fractal structure of a chart. It starts at the shortest time frame and then builds into the longer time frames. So, well, I'll bring this back up. Each of these, this is a 10-day chart. You can see that ENPH was moving up nicely. It got up to this point at 35.66 approximately, and then there was a long candle and it broke down. Now, the moving averages I use on this chart are the 3, 6, and 18-day or 18-period exponential moving averages. And when I see a crossover of all three of them, that is either a buy signal or a sell signal. And you can see that over this 10-day time period, after this nice run up, it became really choppy. As stocks become choppy, their fractal number goes up. So the more choppiness, the higher the fractal number. Now, we're not dealing with the actual numbers, but you can see it visually. But looking at this, from this point on, this was a pretty smooth move up here, and then when it started getting choppy, the fractal numbers began to increase, and when choppiness works itself into a stock that has been trending strongly, either up or down, that's a pretty good indication that there is change going on. So the last 5 days of ENPH, each day is represented by the dark area. This is pre and post market with the gray area, and we can clearly see that something is going on in this chart. Now, if in Thinkorswim, if you don't like the intraday data you can click on the wheel at the top, which is what I did to open this up, and then I can go to equities and I can deselect show extended hours trading session. When I do that, the line should disappear. Let me do that again. I don't think I deselected it. So I go click on the wheel, go to equities, get rid of that, and I have to hit apply, and notice that the intraday or the data which is not during real-time trading hours disappears. Now if you look closely at this chart, you'll see a dotted line here and here and here and here and so on, and this represents a trading day without the pre and post-market data. So these bars, which are running down into the volume bars, this represents what has happened on this trading day with ENPH. So just from this point over here, and I'll minimize this, is represented in the daily chart with this bar. And then if I look at the last 5 candles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's represented over here in the weekly chart by this one candle. And then if I count 5 weekly candles, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That is represented in the monthly candle with this long-legged spinning top. So what has happened with ENPH is what happens with every stock or security, ETF, future, it really doesn't matter. The changes begin from the inside out and work their way up into the larger charts, the larger time frame charts. Now, I am not going to go back in time on ENPH clear back here, but let's take a look and see what was happening with the daily and weekly charts back in this time frame. So if I put a crosshair on here with my alternate C key, you can see that that was on Friday, the 22nd of February. I'll bring this up and I will zoom out just a little bit, get this one out of the way, put a crosshair on here, and this 22nd of February would be back here. And with the chart in Thinkorswim, the 78-minute chart, it would have been going up already, but you can see what has happened here on this date on ENPH. There's an effort to rise, another effort to rise, another effort to rise, and we had a negative signal that this was an upthrust and getting a little bit overbought, but it pretty much trended sideways and then started taking off again. So here's the 22nd. Let's go back to this chart. This is the 22nd on Friday. So the stock was already building in this weekly chart. Here we had a low volume test or a test for supply and a confirmation of that test. Same thing here after that, and it took off. So the stock was building on the daily chart. It would have been building also on the Thinkorswim 78-minute chart, and you can see that the structure, the fractal structure, was becoming more and more positive. Another thing about this chart is notice how tight it is on the weekly chart. Let's go back to the daily chart also for that time frame, and you can see that it was very tight in here. It had begun forming an uptrend and a series of higher highs and higher lows, which we want to see on these stocks, because it means that the stock is being accumulated because there is more demand than supply. It's always great to look for charts that are tight, because there's not a lot of question about whether the bulls or bears are in control, because whatever way the trend is going on a tight chart pretty much tells you who's in control of this stock. I'm going to minimize this chart. Let's take a look at the weekly chart, see if I can find that same information on the weekly chart. Here we are on 228 is this monthly chart right here, and you can see that there is a series here. Here's a low in here, here's a higher low, this would be a higher high, higher low, higher high, and then it pulls back on the monthly. But this low does not take out the prior low, so we're still in an uptrend, and then this stock really starts taking off. So the fractals are building to the positive side on all three charts. Higher high, or higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high, and so on up the chain here. Now, this is a really a great stock, because it's gained so much. It's a tight stock. This is what you want to find. Now, most charts don't look like this, of course. But if we can find stocks that are acting like this, these are the stocks that we want to get on. Now, what happened recently here is the stock was trending up. This is a buyable gap up on earnings. It worked its way higher. Let's get this date right here. This is 7/31. That corresponds to this weekly chart here, which is 8/2. But this is what happened, and you can see that there was on the weekly chart a warning here. Now, I am using just the VPA flag charts. If you want to know what that signal was, you just move up to the chart above from 5A to 5, and then this information comes up here, and you can see that this stock at that point was trending up, but we got this signal here. We got an effort to rise, which is very bullish, but we also got an up thrust bar, which is a sign of weakness, and it also indicates that there is some profit taking going on. So 8/2 on this would correspond to 8/2 right here, and you can see that there was some profit taking going on. Pulled back a little bit, got a little bit below support, not very much though, and then it bounced. And the next 5 days after that are represented with these bars, and they're showing up over here in the weekly chart. And that date is 8/9. Let's see what we have here. So it would be contained in this bar, the monthly bar, where we're starting to build that upper wick. I want to point out that there are several warnings on the weekly chart here as ENPH gets extended. There's profit taking here with the circle. That means transfer of ownership. And then this last week, there is an up thrust bar after an up move, which is a sure sign of weakness. Let me bring this up here so you can read this. Confirms weakness. Reached new recent high but failed to hold. Ran into resistance here. But this is a weekly chart, and you can see that it came down from approximately 35.25 all the way down to 28.78. So you can give back a fair share of your profits. And that's why looking at the shorter term fractals, makes a lot of sense. You want to look at the dailies, look at all these up thrust warnings here on this chart, and then it started rolling over. And when I bring up the fractal chart in Thinkorswim, this would even be an earlier warning. Let's take a look at this. Where'd this start running into trouble? On this date right here, which would be the 22nd. I'll make this full frame. Let's, if you look up here in this area, you can see that the 22nd is right here, beginning with this dotted line, which is hard for you to see. But there was a big black candle, and the stock never did surpass this high here. I'm sorry, it did too, but it was immediately rejected over here. So it tried to break out, and the supply overcame the demand, and after that it started downhill. So support and resistance lines do work. You have to be aware of them. Here's a support line. Here's your resistance line across here. And the date on this, at this point, on that resistance was the 27th. So let me minimize this. Let's take a look at the 27th, which is on this day right here. So here is the candle, which was made up of 5 78-minute bars, and you can see that the price was rejected at this level here, and it started down, which was the beginning of the down move, the profit taking. The idea is to look at all time frames. Remember that the long time frames are the primary drivers of a stock price, and this worked very well on the monthly and the weekly until we got up into this area and we started seeing some weakness, and then the daily chart started breaking down, but before that we saw it break down in the 78-minute chart. So keep your eye on the 78-minute chart. I use the 3, 6, and 18-day exponential moving average. I look for multiple crossovers. When the green and the yellow go down through the red, that is pretty good indication of weakness. When it goes up through its strength, but this is where we had the price rejection. So you don't have to stay on top of this minute by minute with a 1-minute chart, but it still helps keep you on the right side of a trade, or the correct side of a trade. Now I'm calling this series Fractals and VPA. HGSI has VPA. All charts are, or all programs have fractal charts. What you really want to look for is in an uptrend, a series of higher highs and higher lows. In a downtrend, a series of lower highs and lower lows. And then when you incorporate the VPA information into a trade, it gives us a visual confirmation of what is happening. Now when you get good at this, and I'm still working at this, this is a relatively new, well, this is new, using fractals and VPA. I got started with fractals, first exposed to them back in 2007, a book called Learn to Trade Markets by somebody named Carl Richards, which I believe was a fictitious name. He just wanted to keep his identity secret. Anyway, he has a really good explanation of fractals. And then after that, more recently, Doc Severinsen, who's an options trader, started using fractals, and that was back in 2014, 2015, and I'm now incorporating it into in with VPA, which is seems to be a very good way to go. Now there will be additional videos coming up on this. I just want to try to keep these reasonably short so you're not overwhelmed. What I did this morning is I started thinking about how I can incorporate this into some screens for or using HGSI. And here's bullish stocks, end of day, $5 and up, 500,000. And then here is the intraday version using my effort versus result combo. But going back to the end of the day, I'm using my VPA trend combo. And what that does is it locates stocks that are, or pushes them to the top if they're trending up on the VPF best fit long, medium, and short, and if the fan is up. These are pushed to the top of the screen. So let's just take a look at pattern energy here, for example. And you can see, well, let me go up just to my 4 chart here because it has this information. You can see that all of the trends are up, and I know that the fan is up also. That information is not up here, but these stocks are trending up. Now you can see why I just use flags only, because this area gets somewhat congested up here. But here's a stock that is moving up, and it's been really, let's go over here to the longer term. It's been really choppy on the monthly chart, but from this area on, which is in the support area over here, it's been moving up, although very erratically. I prefer tighter charts like ENPH, but they don't really come along all that often. Let me change this back to flags only on here. And you can see that there are multiple VPA bullish signals on this weekly chart. Now, this chart has no VPA signals because HGSI needs 120 candles or bars to compute the VPA. So it begins on the weekly chart here. Let me zoom out on this and so you can see over here there are no VPA flags, but after the 120th period, then it starts generating VPA flags. And of course on the daily, this is where they'll appear first after 120 days of data have been accumulated. So with this chart, you can see the monthly is up, the weekly is exhibiting, make this a line here. Oh, here's a low, here's a higher high, this would be a higher low, higher high, this would be a higher low, and I'm comparing it to this low right here, higher low, higher high, higher low, higher high takes that out right there, and it just it continues up. You can use a weekly chart for this, or you can do this on all the charts. A lot of pretty solid VPA flags here. Yes, you get some pullbacks, but notice that support holds for this stock. What I want you to do if you start using fractals is I want you to set up at least these 3 charts. You can use the Thinkorswim intraday chart too if you wish, but look at all of them to get a feel for what a stock is doing. And remember the longer term charts are the ones that dominate. So if you get a little pullback in the daily, unless there's really excessive volume, more than likely the longer term charts are going to keep a stock going in the correct direction. Now, this is something else you should try. Notice that, well, let me go back over here. When I'm sorted on raw combo, these numbers are all the same. Why? Because the combo, if any stock or ETF meets these criteria, these are all weighted, the long, medium, short, and the fan all weighted the same. If whatever stock meets those criteria, they're all going to have the same raw combo number. Now when I scroll down here and one of those characteristics changes, you can see that goes from 2412 to 2211. And if I scroll to the right, you can see that above this level, all of these trends were up, as was the fan. But now we have a short-term downtrend with Cray based upon the short-term trend. So now we have a different raw combo number. The one solution that I've come up with is do a secondary sort. Let me get back. I need to get back all the way over here. So I'm sorted on raw combo. Do a secondary sort. And my secondary sort is industry percentage price change 1 day. And to find that, all you do is go in here and search, and you type in end percent, and here it comes up. And this will show you the stocks. It'll sort by the stocks that have the 3 trends up plus the fan, but then the next sort is the industry. So the industries that were up the most for that day, and you can see that right here, industry percentage price change 1 day up 1.97%, are going to be at the top of the list. These stocks are all trending or meeting the requirements based upon the daily chart, but we also now have insight into which of the groups were strongest that day. Let's go to base metal. Starting to trend on the monthly. The weekly has been trending, a little choppy. The daily, kind of all over the place here. So try to locate the charts which are the tightest across the time frames if you can. Here's Valvoline. Okay, this is choppy on monthly, but look how this has moved up from about 17.5 to 22.5, and it started building on the weekly chart before that. Big move up, good VPA flags down here, and here's your daily chart. Looks like an earnings gap up, a pullback, but a slight pullback in the daily is represented here in the weekly in these 2 weeks right here, but it looks like it's going to go up again. Okay, so I think that's a good way to approach this. The intraday stocks, of course, or the intraday moves, of course, are based upon my intraday combo, which is effort versus result, which weights the range, the percentage price change, and the percent volume to the 90 equally, and it'll bring these to the top during the day. So if you want to do some prospecting during the day, and by the way, Sonos has been moving up nicely over the past several days. Let me get this out of here. I'll do it this way. And I need to find that chart. And the symbol is SONO. Move up prior to the 10-day view, and then you can see some profit taking here. But notice that volume really fell off on this pullback, except when we got back here it picked up a little bit. But you'd be out of it and then re-entering this stock approximately at this point. Big volume spike, demand coming in, and it took off again. Another thing you can do is go to the end of day sort, still on the same thing, raw combo, industry percentage price change 1 day, and then you can disengage the combo. You can go down to intraday and see which of these stocks in the intraday screen will see how they're doing the following day, see if they're following through. Okay, one more thing and I'll end this video, and we'll be talking more and more about this. This is Fractal stocks end of day. These are stocks that have a bullish VPA flag today. You can see that Pattern Energy did. There it is right there. Effort to rise here. That was a negative sign, but this is an effort to rise, and you look back across, see the weekly and the monthly. Let's look at the Barrick Gold, or let's look at Kirkland. Been a strong monthly chart and a strong weekly chart, and then the daily charts kind of been all over the place, but here we have a low volume test. Once again, there is a intraday version of this, and you can see that this stock was up 52% for the day. Don't know a thing about it, but you know, when you get a move like that, something's going on. And you go back and you look at the other charts. Here's a monthly, a lot of rejection, price rejection up here with these upper wicks, so you have to be careful. It traded up to around 12 and then sold off back to around the $4 area. I would certainly look up the news on this before I get too excited about it. But once again, the fractals tell us a lot. I'm going to end this video now. It's getting a little bit lengthy, but there will be more of this. If you're an Insider Club member, go ahead and update the add-on again, and you're going to get the number 14 folder Fractals with all the associated filters and combos. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you soon.